Hi, Donna. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Mike. Good to see you all. Thank you all for coming. We got a lot of people joining. This is awesome. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Bonnie. Hi, Dawn. Bonnie, you have the same name as our speaker. Hi, Judy.
I can't see any of you, but hello, and thank you for joining.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes just to let some people trickle in. Good to see everybody. Thank you all for joining. Hi, Virginia. Hi, Stephen. Hey, Chuck. All right. Let's see. Still got people coming. This is great. All right. Hi, Susan. Good to see you. Well, I can't see you, but I can see your name. Thank you for coming. All right, everyone. Hope you're ready. Hey, Jane. Lots of people. All right, we are going to get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight on this fine evening, on this Wednesday evening. And welcome to Housing Part 2, brought to you by NAMI Cook County North Suburban and Bonnie Lane. I am Bree Hoekstra, the Program Director at NAMI Cook County North Suburban. NAMI, or the National Alliance for Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, providing public awareness, no-cost support, and education programs online and in person so that people and families affected by mental health conditions can build better lives. We are a lifeline to individuals and families who do not know what to expect in their difficult life journey. We offer classes and support groups and do a lot of local advocacy work for mental health. Our programs are free and open to those in our 20 community service areas, but we do not turn anyone away who is in need. During our Housing Part 1 webinar last month, our guest speaker, Beth Neighbors, provided us with information related to the housing crisis, including the lack of supportive and affordable housing for people with disabilities, mental health, and/or substance abuse issues. Our topic tonight, Housing Part 2, our guest speaker, Bonnie Lane, will continue this conversation, specifically speaking on the various levels of housing opportunities in Illinois for those with a mental health diagnosis that have Medicaid, SSI, or SSDI, as well as private pay opportunities. Last month, we learned that the housing crisis continues to be a pressing issue in many regions, with some trends including homelessness, affordable housing shortages, rent burden, evictions, and many more. According to Beth Neighbors, affordable housing is part of the solution, and research shows that supportive housing helps people with disabilities remain housed and receive better health care. Beth stated that there are 7 essential characteristics of supportive housing, including permanence and affordability. Services are housing oriented. Services are multidisciplinary. Services are voluntary but assertive. Integration, emphasis on choice, and low barrier to entry. It is apparent that systems have been put in place to ensure that the housing crisis can hopefully be resolved very soon. However, we must take into consideration the different levels of housing, especially for those under Medicaid, SSI, or SSDI. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2022, 20% of Illinois' population is covered by Medicaid, which is over 3.6 million individuals. And according to the USA Facts, in the US, there were 7.7 million SSI recipients in 2021. Our guest speaker tonight will provide information for such individuals that will include getting on lists, post-hospitalization housing, permanent supported housing, as well as residential treatment facilities in states that require private insurance or private pay capabilities. Our webinar tonight was designed as a semi-interactive webinar in which Bonnie will spend time throughout her presentation answering questions that you may have. Therefore, if you were unable to send questions prior to this webinar, please type them in the chat box throughout so that Bonnie can stop and answer any questions that may arise. We will also leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end as well. It is an honor to introduce our guest speaker, Bonnie Lane, a therapeutic consultant and owner of Family Support Services, who specializes in support, advocacy, resource referrals, and communication coaching. Bonnie is a graduate from the National Louis University with master's degree with honors in both developmental and counseling psychology. She is also a certified mediator and certified in domestic violence counseling. Bonnie served as the program director at Youth Services in Glenview and Northbrook for 6 years. Among her responsibilities was facilitating groups for parents of children suffering with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. She was also the executive director of Project CHISIT for the JCCs of Chicagoland and served as the executive director of Wilmette Youth Connection. But most recently, Bonnie worked for Threshold Community Mental Health Agency as the team leader for all case managers in the young adult program. For more than 2 decades, Bonnie has worked privately with families dealing with mental health issues. She has consulted individuals and families as they successfully navigate the maze of care and resources available for young and older adults. Helping families in times of crisis is her mission and her passion. Bonnie is currently a member of the NAMI Illinois Legislative Committee, the North and Northwest Suburban Housing Task Force, the Healthy Minds, Healthy Lives Coalition through Threshold, and the Mental Health Summit. Bonnie is a board member of No Shame on You, where she facilitates support groups for families of adults with severe mental illness. Bonnie provides subject matter presentations for many mental health and senior organizations. We are so thrilled to have her here tonight to further educate us on this ever important topic of housing. I am honored to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Bonnie Lane.
Thanks so much, Bree, and thank you all for joining me, even though I can't see you. Bree, I will tell you that in the Q&A, it says the chat is disabled.
Oh, no.
So okay. Hopefully, Bree will figure out how you can get your questions answered, because the typical way that I do a presentation is an open conversation. And the reason I do that is because I want to make sure that I am able to answer the questions that you have, not just the things I want to talk about. I could talk for many, many hours, and I'm going to start right now. So
real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry that the chat is disabled. When you are trying to ask a question, just put it in the Q&A rather than the chat, because I am seeing those up there. So if you want to put your questions in that section, we would really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Sorry about that.
Excellent, Bree. Love the workaround. Okay, so when someone you love is identified as seriously mentally ill, the first thing that you think about is getting them care. You reach out to organizations like NAMI for support, resources, and education. You contact people to assist you in finding the right psychiatrist, the best therapist, and if necessary, arrange for a hospitalization for stabilization, followed by various kinds of day programs, PHPs, IOPs, to continue the work done in the hospital. And in my work, I help people with all of that. But the most important thing that people ask me regularly is, where will my loved one live? What housing is available in Illinois? And I want to talk to you about that. It's not until much later than you realize that having your adult child, parent, partner, sibling living with you might not be the healthiest arrangement for you or for your family member. And we want you to be able to have a healthy relationship. So when you come to that aha moment, your search for permanent, supported, sustainable housing begins. I emphasize sustainable because all housing is not created equal. I'm going to say that again. All housing is not created equal. As Beth said, there's a huge shortage of housing, but it doesn't mean that we just need more housing. We need more good housing with linked services and access to community resources and public transportation that's affordable and takes our benefits, that we can live and work and develop relationships and connections and community. And that's what the world is really looking for in recovery of the mental illness. So in searching for housing options, the two most important things you're looking for are level of care and funding sources. So level of care could be you are just coming out of the hospital, or you have an existing mental illness, but you're in recovery and you are functioning very well. So most of the places that I'm going to talk about tonight do require Medicaid and SSI or SSDI. Those are easily accessible with a diagnosed mental illness. That being said, they take time to get. Since COVID, everything has taken a lot longer. So when your loved one is having experiences with symptoms of severe mental illness, it's important to start talking to professionals like the executive director of NAMI CCNS. Jeff Rabin is my go-to for Social Security support, and his law firm can help anyone get on Social Security that is appropriate for it. And once you have Social Security, either SSI or SSDI and Medicaid, your options for permanent supported housing become much more available. I'm going to start with the highest level of care. When you're hospitalized, if you cannot go home and you need somebody to manage your meds and provide you with psychosocial programs and therapy and psychiatry, the best place to turn would be a SMRF, SMHRF, Specialized Mental Health Recovery Facility. There are between 47 and 50 SMRFs in the state of Illinois, spread all around the state. And some are better, some are worse. Not going to lie, but they provide, for the most part, a shared bedroom in a community. They have psychosocial groups. They have socialization groups like art and music therapy and things like that. They also have therapeutic groups like DBT and CBT. You have a community, you have your meals together, and most importantly, your medication is asked. That's what I want you to remember. With a SMRF, you get your medication passed. There is an RN on the premises that will make sure that you get your medicine at the time that you need it every single day. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's compliant, but in an ideal world, that's the highest level of care. And once you have lived in a SMRF, for 6 months, a year, 6 years, whatever it is, a SMRF's identified as being recovery facility, which means that the goal for most people is to move out. So they move in, they stabilize, they become more comfortable with their abilities to take their medication and live in a community, and then they can move out. So there are two ways to move out of a SMRF. Well, there's more, but two main ways. One of them is called the front door program. Front door will come to the SMRFs and they will talk to individuals who appear to be ready to move on, and they will offer them either an SRO, single room occupancy, or a room in a motel in a community of their choosing. Not necessarily a lovely motel. They will tell them where services are. And you are kind of on your own to cook and clean and figure your way out and get a job to pay your bills. And if you feel that you're ready for that level of independence, it could be a good choice. But for most people, I recommend the moving on program. The Moving On program is a wonderful opportunity that we in Illinois have. There was a lawsuit many years ago called, it was the Williams and the Colbert lawsuits. And Williams and Colbert were two individuals that were incorrectly placed in a nursing home post-hospitalization. And because they were placed in a nursing home instead of a mental health facility, because we didn't have mental health facilities other than institutions in those days, it was determined that anyone that lives in a SMRF is entitled to permanent supported housing. I'm going to repeat that. Permanent supported housing. That means they get their own apartment in a neighborhood of their choice, unlike the front door. They can choose to live near family or friends or work. They can choose a community like that. It's always near resources. It will be linked to a mental health agency such as Thresholds, Trilogy, Lutheran Social Services, C4, an association house. Those are just off the top of my head, and there are probably others. That Catholic Charities also is involved, and an ACT or CST team will be assigned, and that's a team of people that will come to the individual's apartment and visit them up to 3 or 4 times a week at the beginning to make sure that they're adjusting and acclimating. They fill their house with groceries. At the first time, they'll help them with cooking or with marketing or with budgeting. And eventually somebody will get a job, hopefully soon, and be able to live independently, but that apartment is theirs forever. Let me go back one more thing. A SMRF you can live in for the rest of your life. There is no end date. So if you move into a SMRF and you're comfortable in that level of care and you feel safe, there is no reason why you have to accept any of the programs that come and visit you. You don't have to ever leave. You could stay there for the rest of your life. It is permanent housing. It only accepts Medicaid or private pay. Really, that means only Medicaid, because private pay can be as much as $7,000 a month to live in a SMRF, but Medicaid is great. And they have a psychiatrist that you will see once a month. Some have therapists on the premises or zoomed in. Some use community-based therapists. So that will be your team and a case manager, your team while you're living in the SMRF. Now, when you move out, you will need to get another psychiatrist, another therapist. You'll be given a case manager by the mental health agency that is linked to your organization, your housing, and the state assigns these. So we don't get to choose, oh, I'd like to be with Thresholds, or I'm comfortable with Trilogy. Yeah, the state assigns them, but they all do a really good job. So we just have to trust that we're going to be in good hands. So we've left the SMRFs. We are now either in Moving On or the front door. Moving On definitely has more substantial supports than the front door. The front door does cost less to the state. I'm going to be very honest. I believe Moving On gives you more, and it's forever. When you're in Moving On, you can live in your apartment for the rest of your life or move up to 3 times on your choice. So you can move 3 times and your benefits and your supported housing will follow you. Now, let's say your apartment, which is earmarked Section 8, the landlord says, well, I've had this tenant here for 5 years and it's a really good market now. I think I could really rent this out for more money. They can choose to tell you that, it's time for you to go. That does not count as one of your 3 times as moving. It only is 3 times of moving if you make the choice, not if the apartment is no longer available. It's important that when you're looking at apartments, and your mental health agency will show you different apartments in the area you choose, look for the things that are important to you: walking distance to a grocery store, public transportation nearby, that you'll have a free pass with their SSI and Medicaid. Maybe you want to be near a health club. Maybe you want to be near a co-op of some kind. Maybe you want to be near the beach or a park or a place you can ride your bike. This is your home. So just like everyone else gets to choose their home that meets their needs, So do you. And it's important that we all understand that and we respect that. So you now are in your moving on program or your front door. And what's important to you is that you find a job. All of the mental health agencies that you will be linked to will have a vocational counselor. All will have a vocational counselor. If you are not able to work, it's probably unlikely that you are ready to move out of the SMRF. It means that you might need a little more time. I recommend to the clients that I work with that they do volunteering while living in the SMRF. I want them to get the handle of being in the community. So that's how I do it. And I recommend 3 to 6 months of volunteering. And maybe if you're lucky, which has happened to some of my clients, you get hired by the place you've been volunteering. It's a very smooth transition. It looks like there's 3 things in the Q&A, Bree. Do you want, it might be a time for me to pause before I go on to the next level of housing.
Yeah, of course. So the first question says, Bonnie, my friend is 80 and has a 43-year-old son with serious mental illness. She is worried what happens when she passes away. He will have a significant amount of money in a special needs trust. How do we find housing for him? Maybe you are going to answer this. Thank you for speaking to me.
I'm very happy to answer that. So, you know, having a significant amount of money is a double-edged sword. That means that they can buy him a condo or a home anywhere they want, and they can staff it if that's what they need to do. Unfortunately, they are not eligible for housing that is Medicaid based, and he will probably never be eligible for something Medicaid based unless the special needs trust has all of the money. So I would speak to the estate planning attorney that wrote the special needs trust and see how the monies can be put in the special needs trust, because any money in the trust does not count against you for benefits. Any money in the trust does not count against you for benefits. So I would recommend that you immediately have your friend call her estate planning attorney and figure out how to transfer the funds so there is access to the housing availabilities that are options in our area. And he could then get on Medicaid, because having money doesn't mean you can take care of yourself. And so I think it's very important that we allow everyone to access whatever resources and services are available, regardless of the money. I'm assuming he did not earn the money. He is inheriting the money, and the money should be in the special needs trust to keep it not only so that he won't make any poor decisions, because, you know, mentally ill people can make reckless choices or decisions that might not be in their own best interest if they have a lot of money. They're easily victimized if they have a lot of money. They could be taken advantage of. So I would make sure that that money is put into the special needs trust with a trustee, either an individual that they trust, or there are trust officers that can manage the trust for you, and they can be identified by the name of their banker trust.
Thank you so much. And a follow-up from that question was related to what you said. And he said, all of the money is in the special needs trust and he cannot live independently with schizophrenia.
If all the money is in the special needs trust, then he can take advantage of all of the housing options I will talk about today. And they should then talk to a Social Security lawyer and somebody to help them get Medicaid so that we can get him into housing, supported housing, permanent supported housing, so that she doesn't have to be worried and he will be safe.
Thank you for that, Bonnie. Another question we have was, I was on SSI for over 22 years with dual diagnosis. Then I got to working and now have Medicare, not Medicaid. When I stop working in a few years, I will be homeless. No savings, no family, no resources as a senior citizen. I fall outside all the boxes. What does a person like me do? Additionally, she says, I need to add that I am self-sufficient with the work and the early retirement, but the bills are going up and it's difficult as a senior citizen.
I'm really sorry. And that happens to so many people. When people are able to start working, they're so happy with the opportunity of making money that they don't look at the laws. And we have very difficult, strict laws in Illinois that we are working right now in Congress to change the amount of money you can earn and still keep your benefits. But that hasn't happened yet. So right now there is a low amount of money that you're allowed to work. I believe you can work like 20 hours a week and still maintain your benefits. That's what I recommend to the families that I work with so that you don't lose your Medicaid. You're right, you will lose your Medicaid and you'll have to reapply and it will be complicated. Medicare does not provide housing like Medicaid does. It's a totally different pocket and it doesn't work the same way. So I would seek out the counsel from a Social Security attorney and somebody in the Social Security office regarding Medicaid and explain to them, because you can have Medicaid and Medicare. You can have SSI and SSDI. You're entitled to all of it, but you need somebody that's knowledgeable to walk you through how to get it all so that you get everything you're entitled to and you won't lose your benefits. Now that you've lost them, you can get them back, but I would not wait until you retire. I would try to do it now and see if it was possible once you get, if you could cut down your hours to be within the limitations of our benefits programs so that you do have access to housing, because we don't want you homeless. And housing is the most important thing. There is another bill in Congress right now called Housing is Health. And I do believe that if more people that had mental health issues had safe, secure, sustainable housing, the world would be a lot better. Mm-hmm. Now, there will always be people who choose not to go into housing. They will choose to live in shelters or under a bridge. I have experience working with people that have made those choices. But if that's not your choice, then there should be housing opportunities for you. So I would recommend that you contact a Social Security attorney who will not charge you anything. They take a percentage, but they don't charge you anything up front. So none of your money will go. And talk to them about Medicaid and Social Security and how you can get your benefits back before you retire.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, next question says, my daughter is 60 years old. She has Medicaid, but not SSI. I applied for it, but was denied. I appealed it, but I have not heard from it yet. My daughter was diagnosed as schizophrenia, bipolar, and it is real. What's some advice that you can give to this person?
I'm going to send you right back to Jeffrey Rabin. His law firm can assist with the appeal. They will accompany you to the appeal. So I would recommend that you contact Jeffrey Rabin or another Social Security attorney who can assist you with this appeal. If your daughter has an existing diagnosis of schizophrenia, bipolar, schizoaffective, any of the serious mental illnesses, and 60 years old, she definitely is entitled to SSI or SSDI. SSI and SSDI differ in that SSI you can get without having worked. If you have worked 10 quarters, you're entitled to SSDI. It's more money. You also can get SSDI or with Medicare if you have a parent that has retired and is taking Social Security. And I would assume a 60-year-old would have a parent that is retired, but I'm not an attorney. So I would pass this on to Jeffrey Rabin or another Social Security attorney that can give you all the information you need.
Thank you so much. One of the questions says, can you please provide Jeffrey Rabin's contact information? I got you. I will type in his email address in just a minute. And Bonnie, we do have some questions that were sent prior to the webinar. Would you like me to read those off right now, or would you like to wait towards the end?
I'm going to go into the next level of housing, and then we'll take a break, okay? So the next level of housing is called a TLP, or a transitional living program. Okay. It serves a more independent individual than a SMRF. You can go there directly from home or from the hospital or from a SMRF. You can go there from all ways. I should say right now, SMRFs are only accepting direct placements from hospitals, but a TLP is accepting from any location, okay? It serves a more independent one, but Turning Point and Alexian Brothers are two options, two of the facilities that provide this kind of housing. It's a shared apartment, like a 2-bedroom apartment with less oversight. There's a case manager that you'll have, but sometimes you'll see them once a day, maybe a few times a week. It's not going to be as intensive. You'll be required to take your medication yourself, but you will also be required to participate in the beginning in 12 hours a week of some kind of groups, because the goal is for independence. So you have instruction that's leading you toward independent living. The instruction can be taking you to the grocery store, meal planning, grocery shopping, laundering, cleaning your apartment, and therapeutic groups as well, and psychosocial groups. It's also linked. Alexian Brothers has their own psychiatrist and therapist that you can access through them. And Turning Point is linked to Heartland in Skokie, so right near you, not far from you at all. And Heartland will also provide you with a psychiatrist and a therapist. They have scattered site apartments in Skokie. Turning Point has apartments in Elk Grove Village, I believe, and Arlington Heights. I'm not sure. If I'm wrong, somebody should tell me. Impact has apartments in Evanston. So these are the next level of care. Impact has even less support. You can go to their offices every day if you need to, or as often as you want, but you're very independent. That being said, you need to be able to take your medicine independently. That's a big catch. So if you feel that your loved one is not compliant or might not take their medicine regularly or forgets because of their symptoms, then a TLP may not be the right level of care for them. But if they are, it's good. Now you can live in a TLP for 2 years. Now remember the other places that I've mentioned, the SMRF, moving on, and front door, that's forever. Front door is kind of forever. But SMRF and moving on, definitely forever. A TLP is for 2 years. So after 2 years, it's on you to find another apartment. And that sounds really hard and unfair because you still have a mental health diagnosis and you've only been in there 2 years, and 2 years goes really, really quickly. So there is an option though, and timing is everything. And that's when the Housing Task Force comes into play. The Housing Task Force for North and Northwest Suburban Cook County works with developers to build and develop apartment buildings in North and Northwest Suburban Cook County. They're Section 8 apartments. They take the same amount of money as Moving On does, 1/3 of your Social Security. That's your whole rent. 1/3 of your Social Security. So if you're on SSI and you're making $720, you're paying a lot less than if you're on SSDI and you're making $1280. So you're still only paying 1/3. So that's really important that people understand that they are only going to have to be responsible for 1/3. But with that, you are also responsible for your groceries and your toiletries and your Con Ed, and if you want Wi-Fi or cable or any of those things. So most people will need to work. Structure is the most important thing for somebody with mental illness to stay in recovery, especially if you have a dual diagnosis with mental illness and substance use disorder. You know, you need to be structured so that you are not distracted or tempted. So the Housing Task Force that I'm also a part of is through NAMI, and Hugh Brady and Lori Grant Granial, I think I'm saying it right, are our co-presidents, and we meet once a month in Arlington Heights, usually at the library. And the developments are for people with disabilities. So they're multi-use, they're mixed use, but there are a lot of people that live in them with mental illness. And because the task force is all part of NAMI, we do our best to fill it with people that have high functioning mental illness. That means that they are ready to live independently. There will be nobody in your apartment but you. There are studio and 1-bedroom apartments. There may even be a couple of 2-bedroom apartments for families where the head of household is seriously mentally ill. They're in communities, access to resources with either public buses or PACE buses that go right by and take you to the grocery store. So let me just tell you, in case you are interested in that level of care, you can go to the website housingtaskforce.org. I'm going to put it in the chat. Can I do that? Will it show? Okay, can you put it in housingtaskforce.org?
Got you.
Okay. And the phone number there is 847-558-9917. The reason I'm telling you all this now is because anyone that's at all interested in getting one of these apartments, we have 4 buildings and the 5th one is under construction, get on the wait list now. It's a long wait list. It could easily take a year and maybe more. So when you're in a TLP, we were just talking about that, and you know you only have 2 years to live there, you better start looking for where your next place to live is that you can afford. TLPs will take some private insurance, Medicaid, and that's it. And so when you move out, you're going to need a place that you can afford to live forever. And the Housing Task Force apartments are permanent supported housing. Back to my favorite word, permanent. So then you are back to permanent supported housing. You can live in this apartment. On the Housing Task Force, there are representatives of the buildings who talk to us every month and tell us what's going on. There's a housing manager in the building, a house manager, a building manager that you can talk to if you're having a problem. They do some socialization. They try to build community. A lot of it's on you. But if you can, again, it's good to work or volunteer, even very part-time, because we need structure. I don't like the idea of anyone sitting in their apartment and waiting for their next meal. You know, you have to be able to go to the store and grocery shop and clean and cook and make friends and interact, and I think work a little bit. So that's the next level of care. So that's the highest level of care is complete. Yes, that's an excellent idea, Bree. NAMI CCNS is always looking for volunteers. And a lot of places will use peers. So peers can be at a variety of levels. The highest level of a peer is a CRSS. They are people with lived mental health conditions who have taken a really long program. I think it's like 2 years or a year and a half. Yeah. A really long program where you are certified as a peer and you earn a nice living wage, and you can work in living rooms. If anybody doesn't know what a living room is, ask, and I'm happy to share that. You can work in living rooms. You can work for all the mental health agencies. You can work for NAMI. Everybody is looking for peers. Peers are wonderful. NAMI's In Our Own Voice is actually a program completely dedicated to the role of peers, which I love. And so there are things that you can do, but you can also do marketable work. You know, I know people that are working at Home Depot, played against sports, public libraries, grocery stores, Target, Costco. You know, there's all different kinds of jobs. You want to be with a lot of people, go to Costco, push the carts, make friends. You want to be in a quieter environment, go see if you can shelf books at the library. It's a really nice environment. So there's always places, and a lot of stores are very, very to hire people with lived experience. As long as you're able to do the job, there's no reason why you can't get one. Looks like we have 5 things in the chat and the Q&A. I don't know which one is for me.
I got you. There is one question. We do have a participant who's having a little bit of a difficult time keeping up with all the information and is wondering if it is written anywhere or if something can be emailed out to maybe a one-pager of resources.
Oh, I wish. Tell them that they can feel free to call me. I put my phone number at the beginning, and I'm happy to give anybody a 30-minute consultation for free. My 30-minute consultations usually last about an hour. I never turn anybody down for information. And so please feel free to ask me whatever you want to know. Yeah, that's me. Feel free to call. You can call or text on that line. Keep in mind, if I don't get back to you immediately, it means I'm busy, but I'll probably get back to you within 24 hours. There's no obligation to hire me for anything ever. So, because that's me. You said there were some questions that people had given you before.
Yes, I have 3 questions that were sent prior to this webinar. The first one says, what advice would you give to the 80-year-old mother who has had a 50-year-old son who has always lived with her, who has anxiety and depression issues and some mild learning issues and has never worked? Who is going to care for this child when she is no longer able to do so? Who will pay the bills, take care of the house, make sure he eats? Well,
obviously they're not going to stay in the house. And we go back to the housing options that are available. Contact an estate planning attorney, get all of the finances organized in a special needs trust. Just the same things that we were talking about before. It's really sad. I do get calls regularly from elderly people who have been fully responsible for their adult mentally ill children their entire lives, and nothing was planned to see how they would live. And now we're looking around and saying, oh, cripes, I'm 80 and who's going to be in charge? Well, they're not going to be able to be in charge themselves. So you need to look at probably a SMRF if they have no ability to care for themselves or work or provide day-to-day things. They're not going to be able to maintain a house unless there's enough money to hire an attorney to be in charge, a banker, an attorney to be in charge of paying the bills, and a live-in housekeeper to take care of the person. The only other option would be using the resources that we talked about, the housing resources that have full supports, not the ones where you are independent, but the housing resources that have full supports.
Thank you, Bonnie. Next question says, I have Section 8 housing. I want to move out and leave it with my son, who is 26, who lives with me. He has no income. He has mental illness and substance use disorder. Is this something you can help me with? I don't know if he is allowed. I don't know if HUD allows this, and I don't want to alert them before I move forward.
Wait, so I'm confused. If the person is on, I'm going to ask a question and you can answer in the Q&A. Are you talking about your son moving out of the Section 8 housing, you moving out of the Section 8 housing, you moving out of the Section 8 housing together? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
It seems like she is moving out of Section 8 housing. Oh, I think we got a response. She is moving out.
And her son will remain?
She said, yeah.
Oh, well, that can't happen. So Section 8 housing is done by voucher. So her son would have to apply for his own site-based or individual voucher to get his own Section 8 apartment. They're not transferable. So if she chooses to move out, when HUD finds out, that apartment will no longer be for her son to live in. And if her son has mental illness and substance use disorder, I don't know what treatment she's tried for him, but it seems like leaving him alone with mental illness and a substance use problem in a Section 8 apartment is asking for trouble. So I would wonder what kind of treatment she has tried for him, and then when he is ready to get him his own independent apartment when he's in recovery. Probably not the answer anybody wanted, but it's the answer.
Thank you, Bonnie. If there is a follow-up with that, please feel free to type in the Q&A. While we wait, the next question that was sent before us says, what happens to people with mental health issues who currently have housing with family, but the situation is less than optimal? It seems a lot of the supportive housing is slanted towards unhoused and people of limited means, which makes it hard to find housing options for those who don't qualify. I understand why this is given the shortage of affordable housing in Illinois, but the information about what is available is hard for the average person to access, with so many agencies and state and federal departments to monitor closely. To sum it up, what about those who fall through the cracks?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So if the assets that you have are your own and you are financially able to move out independently, go for it. If the assets that you're using are not your own and you have limited financial assets or resources, then you can access these housing opportunities. It sounds like you're high functioning, and so the Housing Task Force, the website and phone number that I gave you was a great place for you to start. You can get yourself on the waiting list, and within a year, you should have an apartment that you can afford. If you are not on Medicaid or Social Security and you are working full-time and you can afford your own apartment, then great. Our resources are indicated for people who cannot support themselves to a place where they can afford marketable, competitive rent. If you can, I know it may not be your choice to pay a high rent, but there are communities where rent is less, or maybe think about getting a roommate. There are ways to do it. I understand that not everyone wants to live with their parents. You have to figure out if you can either work or you need to go on disability.
Thank you, Bonnie. Next question, we got one in the chat, says, family member is currently in a SMRF on SSDI, private pay, until Medicaid kicks in. If she needs more medical attention in the future, where would she end up?
It's a really good question. So SMRFs are only for mental illness. They're not for physical illness. So if somebody needs more medical attention, they will be transferred to a skilled nursing facility, otherwise known as a SNF. And there are SNFs that have psychiatric floors. There are a number of them in the area and the state, and that's where they would be transferred. And the SMRF would do that transfer. When the SMRF finds that they can no longer care for someone, like they need to go on dialysis, or they need to use a walker, or they develop, some other medical condition, sleep apnea. Some SMRFs will allow a nurse, but that's very, very rare and only for a short time. For the most part, you need to move into a skilled nursing facility with a Medicaid bed. And those are available.
Awesome. This next question, great question. It says, it seems like most of these programs are geared towards individual adults. What about families, adults living with mental illness with children?
Really good question. You're right. So I was telling you about the Housing Task Force has studio 1-bedroom and some 2-bedroom apartments designed just for that. When the head of household has a mental illness, that's what it's for. You can also look at Section 8 housing, which will be appropriate for families. And when you go on the Section 8 websites or the Housing Task Force website, it will ask you how many people are in your family, and it will help you find housing for the number of people you have. We don't want anybody left out.
Question to follow up from me, honestly, is the waiting list for those typically longer than those with individualized needs?
I'm not sure if that's accurate. I think they're all about a year.
Hmm.
But there probably are fewer apartments in the housing task force buildings, but there are Section 8 apartments all over the city and suburbs. There are all different communities that are available that do have 2-bedroom apartments. I don't know about 3-bedroom apartments, but I know that there are 2-bedroom apartments, and usually a 2-bedroom apartment can easily house a family of 4.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see, we got a couple more. It says, are you familiar with Kenneth Young Center, and do they provide housing? I mean, help people find housing.
So the Kenneth Young Center is a linked agency for some of the Housing Task Force's buildings. So they do what they would just refer you back to housingtaskforce.org, and the phone number that I gave you before, 847-558-9917. So Kenneth Young will redirect you to the Housing Task Force website. And if you're more comfortable on the phone, somebody should answer.
Awesome. We are through. So, just one bunch just popped up. Do you have any info or knowledge about programs in Indiana? We are in Illinois, but we have a family member in Indiana that might need assistance.
Yeah, I do know some places in Indiana, and that's going to be touched on my next topic. In Indiana, I only know residential treatment facilities for people with serious mental illness. I don't know what their local Medicaid-based housing situation is. If this person is related to you, they can move to Chicago, and after Illinois rather, and after a 3-month residency, they can begin to apply for our services. So if somebody is in Indiana or another state and you want to bring them here because of our great services, you want to bring them here because we have services, not all states have anything. You can bring them here, and after a 3-month residency, meaning they receive mail, they are registered to vote, whatever it is, that they have an electric bill. Then after 3 months, you can then get them on, start applying for our benefits, Medicaid and Social Security. So the last thing I was going to talk about So what happens if independent housing is not appropriate because your loved one's still too unstable? So I started this out saying we start out with after hospitalization. What do we do? So hospitalization is short term. Typical hospital stays in the state of Illinois are 5 to 11 days. It's actually the way it is across the country. It's pretty crappy. Nobody is stabilized. It takes a minimum of 3 weeks for medication to metabolize in your body so that you can begin to see the effects. But we discharge people at 11 days. So not everyone, not most people are ready to go into independent housing. Now a SMRF is something they can do, but those other levels of care, people just aren't ready for it, such a quick thing. So what do? We're ready to discharge from the hospital, but they're super symptomatic. They're still psychotic. They're still hearing voices. Their moods are cycling up and down really fast. They're still aggressive. What do? The hospital is going to discharge them because they're stable enough. That's when we have to look at long-term residential placements. So a residential placement is different than housing. It's therapeutic. Most of them take private insurance. Some don't, and you have to pay privately. Very few in Illinois, there's a couple that will accept Medicaid. They will not be as long-term as we'd like, but there are places like Rosecrans Hospital that will take somebody for 28 days and take our insurance. Rogers in Wisconsin will take Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. It'll take our insurance. If you live in Wisconsin, Rogers will take your Medicaid, which is great, but we don't live in Wisconsin and they won't take our Medicaid. So we have to look at the residential treatment facilities around the country that will meet the needs of our seriously mentally ill folks in a way that we can actually get them into recovery. And they will cover serious mental illness, dual diagnosis with substance use, OCD, PTSD, a lot of trauma work done around the country now, a lot of complex mixed disorders. And so I would recommend you probably would need an advocate to help you find the right facility that will accept your insurance. But if your loved one is not ready for independent housing or even Smurf life, then you may need to look at residential treatment facilities around the country. And there are a few in Illinois, and they're all over the country. And even the ones that are not in our state will accept our private insurance. So if you're considering taking your loved one at 24 years old off your private insurance, but they may need a residential placement, don't do it. If they're 26 and they're about to age out of your private insurance, you can call your insurance provider and say, I have a disabled adult loved one, and they will let you keep them on your insurance till they're 30. Little known fact. So keep them on your insurance if you're going to need a residential placement. Employee-based insurance are usually the best ones. Affordable Care Act are the worst ones, least likely to be accepted because they don't pay well. So we look at those as options. A residential treatment facility, you stay in from 28 days to 12 months plus, as long as it takes you. Somebody mentioned Indiana and Michigan. There are places that I know of in Indiana and Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin and Illinois. We don't have as many residential facilities as others do, but we have some. We also have IOPs and PHPs with housing. An IOP is an intensive outpatient program, and a PHP is a partial hospitalization program, a very good option post-hospitalization to go directly into one of those programs, either as a day program from wherever you're going to be living, or as a residential option for 28 days, just to give you a little longer to get stabilized. So that's a whole nother topic to discuss IOP, PHP, and what type of programming is available. But keep in mind that not everyone is ready post-hospitalization to go into housing. So, we're all talking about housing, but that woman that said her son is, has a serious mental illness and a substance use, and she wants him to stay in the Section 8 housing. My opinion is I'm thinking about what resources do we have to get him better instead of just keeping him in the house. So there are resources, and that's what we should be looking at, how to aid our loved ones in recovery, because recovery is real and possible. I know a lot of people who are very successful. I'm not saying they never have a slip. I'm not saying that mental illness goes away, but they learn to deal with their symptoms, which is really important. And they learn strategies through DBT and CBT so that they eventually can utilize the housing resources that we've talked about tonight. But we have to get them there. We have to make sure that our loved ones get every chance to live a full independent life.
Thank you, Bonnie. We do have a couple questions in the chat. The first one says, where are PHPs and IOPs with housing?
There are PHPs and IOPs all over the state of Illinois with housing. You can Google it. I mean, I could give you a list of 30, but I'm not going to. But there are some that I know of in Skokie and in Northbrook and in the western suburbs. So there are PHPs and IOPs with housing. They are available, and they're very valuable, and a lot of them are designed for people with a dual diagnosis of mental illness and substance use disorder. Some of them also treat gambling, PTSD, OCD, and other complex disorders.
Thank you, Bonnie. Next question says, I assume loved one would only be accepted into a facility if they're willing to stop using substances and take their meds. What are your thoughts? for loved ones who admit to pain but are too fearful to stop self-medicating?
Okay, so most places do require you to stop using, not all. Impact uses the harm reduction program. So that means you tell them that you're going to try to use less, and they respect that. And you go to groups or MA, NA, AA, MA, one of those support groups, Smart Recovery. You try to stop. I mean, it's always better, considering marijuana and other substances do exacerbate mental health severity of symptoms. In terms of medication, if you're stable and you refuse to take your medication, a SMRF or housing will not throw you out. You can stay there, not medicated, as long as you do not cause any problem, as long as you're not dysregulated, aggressive, disrespectful, messy. I know somebody that, did some very inappropriate behavior, and they did have to leave because they were off their meds. But there are people that have chosen to not stay on their medication, and they're doing okay. Maybe not the best quality of life, but good enough for them. This is where they're happy, and nobody will be asked to leave from these mental health facilities or these housing facilities as long as they're not causing any trouble.
Thank you so much. So the next question says, can your disabled adult or child remain on your insurance past the age of 30?
Yeah, I don't think you can pass the age of 30. That's why, but we wouldn't want them to. That's why we put them on Medicaid. And depending on what age they became disabled, if they became disabled before the age of 21, and you have documentation like hospitalizations or doctor's records, they can then get Medicare and Medicaid. And Medicare is as good as any other health insurance. The problem is it will not pay for residential, and you'll still need Medicaid for housing. But to go to any doctor in the state of Illinois, any hospital program, you can do it on Medicare. So keeping them on your insurance, I'd have to know why you want them on your insurance beyond the age of 30. And I guess that's a discussion you'd have to have with your employer. Mm-hmm. I know that the oldest I've seen it is age 30.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Next one says, was transferred from Alexian Hospital to SMRF in Highland Park.
Can you say that again?
Was transferred from Alexian Hospital to SMRF in Highland Park.
Yes. Is that a question?
Sister is setting up with the attorney for SN Trust.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing statements and not a question.
They may still be typing. Let's see.
Yes, there is a SMRF in Highland Park. It's a very nice SMRF. You can transfer from Alexian Brothers to a SMRF in Highland Park. It's a very good SMRF. Congratulations if you were accepted, because they're very, very selective. That means that your loved one is very compliant and very appropriate and a pleasure to be around, because that's the Highland Park SMRF. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's wonderful. It's a safe place for a lot of people to live for many, many years. I don't know what your question is. If you have a question, please feel free to ask it, and I'm happy to answer if I can.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. And so far, our question box is empty. So if you continue to think of some questions, please feel free to add them.
Okay. So I've kind of covered all of the housing options that are available in Illinois. I know I did it really quickly. I didn't do it quickly. I think I did it pretty quickly. But I wanted you to know that it's not as gloomy as Beth Neighbors made it out to be, I don't think, because there are options. You just have to be an advocate, and you have to be planful, and you have to apply in a timely manner to get the resources that you need. And you may not get them when you want them, but you'll get them. And yes, we always will need more housing. And we always will need more access to housing, and we always will need better supports for people that are living in housing. But a lot of it is the choices that the residents make. Some people don't want to be linked to services. They only want a place to live. They don't want the supports. That's not our call. Yes, I do believe that housing is more beneficial when it's linked to supports, but we can't force somebody to take services. Looks like somebody asked a question.
Yeah, this is the same person who mentioned the transfer from a Lexington hospital to Smurf in Highland Park. And the next comment was, trust takes all of my assets and disperses them to beneficiary and trustee discretion.
Okay, the trust takes all of her assets?
Sounds that way, yeah.
At the Smurf? Is this person living in the Smurf that's talking right now? Is this a person, because a trust,
like it.
Yeah, so the trust doesn't take, the trust has your assets, and there is a trustee that will help you access your assets for whatever you agree upon is something that you need. The trust can pay for anything you want and need. And that's a discussion you have with your trustee. In terms of what Abbott House takes, they will take all of your Social Security less $60 a month. So they will take all the money to pay for your room and board and services and medical and psychiatrist and therapist and everything at Abbott House. And you will get an allowance of $60 a month, so $15 a week. But, you know, your meals and everything are all paid for. And if you need extra money and you have a special needs trust, then that's something you discuss with the trustee so that they can give you an additional allotment from your trust. I'm trying, I hope I answered it correctly.
It sounds that way. She was confirming, yes, I live in Abbott and she is private pay. So yes, I think you.
So she's private pay at Abbott, which is very expensive. It's about $7,000 a month. Hopefully her Medicaid will kick in quickly and then she won't be private pay anymore. And I understand that if this money is coming out of her trust, that's a lot of money, but it won't be forever. I do believe that once you are pending on Medicaid, you no longer have to private pay. So you can have them check, have the financial person check to see under your Social Security number and your name, if it says that you are Medicaid pending, and then you shouldn't have to private pay anymore, because that means they will get the back pay.
That is expensive. You are not lying.
Oh, no.
It's crazy.
Because it's designed as Medicaid housing, and that's what the state pays. So it's hard. It's unfortunate. This is how our system works.
Yeah, totally. We are getting some more questions. So one of them says, what are the requirements and or documentation needed to get into a SMRF? Great question.
To get what?
To get into a SMRF.
Oh, all you need is a diagnosable mental illness that happens at the hospital, and then they will screen you. So they will interview you for appropriateness, and also Maximus, which is the state agency, will interview you to determine that you are appropriate for Medicaid to pay for a SMRF. And Maximus determines what level of care you need. So it's Maximus, it's the SMRF screening you, and it's the hospital sending the documentation in a packet. 3 things.
Wow.
And the social worker, discharge planner at the hospital can coordinate all of that.
Wow, that seems simple. Awesome. Okay, next question says, my son has been out of a mental health hospital about 12 times in the past 8 years. Would he have to agree to go to a SMRF facility?
Yes. Simple answer. All of the mental health facilities in the state of Illinois are voluntary, as they are in the whole country. So everything is voluntary and nothing is locked except a hospital. So keep in mind that, yes, he has to agree and he can walk out at any time. So he needs to want to be there and get better.
Right. Sometimes that's half the battle, huh?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay, this one is not a question, but it is a comment that I thought would be appropriate to share. It says, I thank you very much, Bonnie, for your help. I really needed this. Can I call you tomorrow? Oh, I guess it is a question. Can I call you tomorrow for more advice? It's about SSI for my mentally ill daughter.
Yes, you can call me. And as I said, I do a 30-minute free consultation. So feel free to call me tomorrow. And as I said, I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, you can call me. Everyone can call me.
Thank you. I love when our speakers provide their personal information. It's really great. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Let's see. Okay, a couple more questions. This one says, it sounds like Harlan Park Smurf is safe. Would like more info about supportive housing that is safe for my daughter or other residents are also compliant or there is staff supervision.
Okay, so only a Smurf has staff supervision. There are Smurfs all over the state. You can actually Google SMHRF, Specialized Mental Health Recovery Facility. Bree's going to put it in the chat right now, I can tell. Specialized Mental Health Recovery Facility. You can Google it in Illinois, and they're going to give you a list of all of them. Some of them are great. Some of them are horrible. I would look them up to make sure that you're not getting ones that are under investigation. I'm not comfortable telling you right now which ones are under investigation, but for my own clients, I do fill them in on that, but that's not something I'd say on Zoom because I don't want to get sued.
That wouldn't be good.
Yeah, not a good plan. I wouldn't be able to. But there are others other than Highland Park that are very good in different areas of the state, and they do a really good job and they have really good resources. And I know people that have lived in them for many, many years very successfully. And more importantly, I know people that have moved out of them and are living independently in their own apartments. And that's always my goal. So I believe that if you do a good job as a Smurf, that means people move out and they live independently and they have a wonderful life. And then I'm happy. And so are your families and you. So, yeah. So, but if you are looking for something that does have staff, it's only a Smurf, or a residential treatment facility, which I told you is the highest level of care right after hospitalization.
Thanks, Bonnie.
They don't take Medicaid.
Oh my dude. Okay, this question, let's see. It says, in my case, my brother, 33, is bipolar. And after each hospitalization, he has returned home to live with my parents. He sometimes stays on his pills and sometimes goes off them and will smoke marijuana. His moods will go up and down. We have a good day and then the next one is a bad day. Right now, he was back home and looking for resources to help him as well as us. Can you please recommend how we can proceed? If he is back home from the hospital, is the first step to get him on SSI or SSDI before we can look into housing options for him?
Well, I would say the first thing you should do if he is post-hospitalization is find him an IOP or PHP. He should not be without supports. So intensive outpatient or partial hospitalization programs, you can Google them. They are all over, attached to hospitals, independent organ agencies, taking private insurance as well as private pay. Very few take Medicaid, but some do. So you can do it like through an organization like Turning Point, and you can do some psychosocial groups that would help, but it's not as good as an intensive outpatient or a partial hospitalization program. So that would be my first thing. As soon as he leaves the hospital, he needs support. And that should be something the next time he's hospitalized, is that you have this in place with the social worker and the unit. You have this plan, this IOP or PHP referral done in place before he leaves the hospital, so that the next day he has a place to go to continue working on his recovery.
Really great advice. Thank you for that. So we have about 15 minutes left. We have some time for a couple more questions. If you have some, please feel free. I just saw one pop up. Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. This one says, my son is returning in July from 19 months in residential care in Arizona. He will move home with us for now. He is doing very well and will be needing surgery on his leg from an injury. We expect him to be with us for at least 6 months and more likely a year, but I can't predict how he will be in a year. Should I put him on the housing task force list anyways? And also look into a TLP.
Okay, so it's a lot of information to unpack. Okay, well, congratulations that he is coming home from 19 months in Arizona. I have a feeling I know where he was. I know all the places in Arizona. And I'm glad that he's recovering enough. And I'm assuming that he stepped down while he was in Arizona and did residential, PHP, and then IOP in lesser and lesser levels of care, so that he is now ready to come home and move back with you. That being said, he cannot get on a housing task force unless you put him on Medicaid and Social Security. So that's your first application before you can get him on the housing task force. So if you feel that he is now stable enough and will be able to get a marketable job, go back to school, won't need benefits, will be able to pay for his own apartment, yeah, that's maybe the way to do it. Even if it's after his surgery. If you feel that he's coming home, but he will always be disabled, he will always need financial, emotional, psychosocial support, then after you get him on Social Security and Medicaid, yes, sign him up for the housing task force. And good luck. I'm very happy for you. I'm excited.
Seems like you answered her second question as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on. This one says, could you recommend an SN trust attorney?
Do I recommend an estate or trust attorney? Mm-hmm. I'm not comfortable doing that right here, but for my clients, I do make recommendations. But since I don't know anything about your situation or your family member or your finances or your location, it would be difficult for me to make a recommendation for you. But you can give me a call.
Yeah, thank you. And the person who just asked that, I'm typing in Bonnie's phone number one more time as a response. So go ahead and check that out. Next question says, oh, not a question. It was more of a comment to the previous one about the brother moving back from Arizona. It says, I got him disability and just have to switch back to Illinois Medicaid he had before.
Oh, excellent. Yes, sign up for the housing task force. If your name comes up, his name comes up before he is ready to move in, then you'll just tell them we're not ready to move in. He's recovering from surgery. Not a problem. They'll just keep you on the list and you'll get your name called again. Absolutely. Never hurts to be overly prepared. I will never say that.
Awesome. So going back to the question on special needs trust, I was just reminded, and I don't even know why I didn't think of this, but we did have a speaker, I want to say in March, on special needs trust. If you attended, her name is Paige Fox. We do have that recording. So if you would like to contact me, my contact information is in the chat. Please feel free to reach out and I will send you that recording that we have from that speaker. Next question is another phone number question. I got you. Let me type that in the chat. There you go. All right. Next says, I have a stable 33-year-old son who is on Medicaid, but years ago was denied Social Security. He's had temporary work on and off, but has been unemployed for over a year. Any place you can recommend we can contact to help him find work?
Oh, sure. The Jocelyn Center has a brand new employment person. Actually, I met her today. So I would call the Jocelyn Center. They only have a 2-week wait right now for a vocational counselor. So they can assist with that. Impact also has housing assistance. So that's 2 places that you can start that will help you get employers. And I do know that Jocelyn just hired a new person too to do it. So they're going to have more than one employment specialist.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great news. All right, it looks like we got time for 1 or 2 more questions. So if we get some, we can ask. Okay, one says, can we get a copy of the part 1 portion of housing? Yes, absolutely. If you would contact me at bhoekstra@namiccns.org. I typed it in the chat for you. If you just send me an email, I will make sure to get you the recording of part 1. Thank you for asking. All right, any more questions? We got time for about 1 more. Okay. What I'm going to do is, Bonnie did share a link to her website. Remember, she is the owner of Family Support Services. I'm going to add the link of her website to the chat for you all as a resource. And then let's see. I did get a comment that said, thank you for what you do.
It's my pleasure. And thank you, NAMI, for giving me this opportunity to share some valuable housing information so that people don't think it's as bleak as they feared. There are different levels of housing available. We just have to know the level of care you need and your funding source. And there is a way for you to get a sustainable, permanent, supported apartment. It's very important. Housing is health.
Oh, sure is. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie, for coming and presenting and sharing everything that you just shared with our community members. It really seems like the content that you have shared was very well received, and it is 100% going to help a lot of people. So thank you very, very much for your willingness to be here with us tonight. We really
it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Bree, and thanks for staying on with me so that I was able to answer questions.
Of course.
If anybody has any more questions, I'm not sure if there are any or not. Otherwise,
that sounds great. All right. So I do have a couple of things to share as a closing before you all go. If you did enjoy tonight's program, you can definitely find more information on upcoming webinars on our website. Our website is www.namiccns.org. Our next program is going to be held on July 19th from 7 o'clock to 8:30, where NAMI CCNS's Executive Director, Jeff Rabin, whose name popped up once or twice during this webinar, will provide us with more information on Social Security disability. Once you log off, you will see a short survey. Please, 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 I beg you, fill it out for us. Not only does this allow us to make improvements and adjustments for our webinar, it also provides us with the data we need to raise money, write grants, and receive funds. So please, please, please take 5 minutes to fill that out. It is not bad, I promise you. And other than that, we really appreciate your presence tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again at a NAMI CCNS community webinar. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great night, and we will see you next month. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Bonnie.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you, Bree.
See you soon.